to Carson Price from the historic Wall Center. It was a very busy weekend for Jeff Paterson on RinkWide Vancouver. A couple of games to unpack, and they could not have been more different.
An emotional roller coaster.
Oh, my goodness, as this Jekyll and Hyde hockey season continues for the Vancouver Canucks. We welcome in our Canucks reporter, Mr. Paterson. Jeff, a few weeks ago, Patrick Alvin said, I don't like driving to the rink not knowing what I'm going to see. And boy, what a difference.
Good thing they were on the road.
Hours.
He didn't have to drive.
Exactly.
He didn't have to drive, at least.
Refresh my memory. What happened on Friday? I flushed that entirely. I'm still riding high on a 3-0 shutout win over the Leafs on Hockey Night in Canada. So everything that happened in the 24 hours and the travel issues doesn't register anymore.
No. Water under the bridge. Tocchet called it one of Pettersson's best games of the season. What says you?
Sure, but bar's pretty low, so I don't want to be, here comes Patterson, dumping cold water on Elias Pettersson. No, he looked totally invested. It was terrific. Still 2 ends of the ice, and he was really good defensively. But even when he wasn't scoring early in the season, he was minding the shop defensively. It's that he's being paid close to $12 million to put that little puck in the net or help others do it. That assist on the opening goal, his first assist since December the 10th. Now, he missed 6 games. But remember, part of the story was when he scored the 2 against San Jose and then left, he had gone 6 games before that without a single point. So, yes, it's great. And if it's a building block, and look, I thought Carolina, nobody was good, but he drew the 2 penalties in the third period. The feet were moving, doing some of the things that you'd like to think will lead to offense. So, yes, promising in that regard, but still a fair bit of ground to cover. And I hope that his time away. And I know after the practice in Montreal, Ian McIntyre talked to him, and he took ownership of his poor performance in the first half. And I thought the answers, at the very least, were mature. And I know Patrick Alvin questioned his maturity. I thought it was good to see him say the right things. Now he's got to go and do the right things. And I thought Saturday was a big step in the right direction.
Even when he's played okay, Tocchet has been very slow to praise him. Yeah, he was good. A lot of those. He praised him after this one. Do you think Pettersson responds to that?
I hope so. I mean, it beats the alternative of hearing the coach not want to answer questions about you or sort of, almost mocking the questions that were coming his way on a nightly basis. We know he's a pretty sensitive guy. And so, again, misses 6 games, comes back. His debut in Carolina wasn't great for the hockey club. They go through the travel troubles. He kind of joked that eat, sleep, and play hockey. And, some of them said it was like taking them back to junior, where this is the norm. You travel on game day, just show up and play. And that's what they did. And I wrote about it at Canucks Army on Sunday. But getting a goal 31 seconds in, after getting shut out the night before, after scoring only 1 in Washington, after the travel troubles, a 4-game losing streak, with Winnipeg in the offing at the end of the road trip, it had the potential to go completely off the rails. We talked on Friday or Thursday when I was on with you. You could feel frustration. You could hear it in the voice of Quinn Hughes after the loss in Washington. Rick Tocchet was getting short again. They needed something to go their way. And to have a goal bank in off Brock Besser 31 seconds in, the headline at Canucks Army was, it might be the biggest goal they score all season. I'm not suggesting that one goal is going to now get them on track, but look, the losing streak could have got to 6 and then some in a hurry unless they rose to the challenge on Saturday night. And so you need your best players doing that. Quinn Hughes was dialed in again, but to have the support of a guy like Elias Pettersson, and look, Rick Tocchet tweaked his lineup a little bit in as much as Pettersson and Besser played together. They played a lot with Quinn Hughes, something that we haven't seen. And, one of the things that wasn't talked about much was JT Miller played 13 minutes on Saturday. And I think some of that was they had a 3-0 lead in the third period. We know that he's playing through something back-to-back 3 and 4 with travel and all that. They had the luxury that they didn't need to lean on a guy like JT Miller. And so a couple of days off here before the Winnipeg game. Hopefully he's rested and ready to go again. But that number jumped off the page at me, just 13 minutes of ice time for JT Miller on the big stage in Toronto.
As we talked about in the opening block, Philip Hronek is on the comeback trail here, Jeff. I don't know if you can call him a cure-all, but is he a cure-most for these Canucks? Do you have confidence they can start looking like that 109-point team with Hronek alongside Hughes?
Well, first, let's just say that for all of the hand-wringing and teeth-gnashing in the market about woe is the Canucks with all their injuries, they got good news on Quinn. Quinn Hughes missed 4 games with his, and Philip Hronek, if he's back here this week, I don't know if he's going to play in Winnipeg, but if he's back this week, like, he's way ahead of the 8-week schedule. So it does cut both ways. I know people sort of want to wallow in the misery, and yes, there's been a ton of adversity, but getting Quinn Hughes back after just 4 when we were told week to week, that was really good news. And, oh, by the way, Quinn Hughes has been on the ice for 6 of the 8 goals the Canucks have manufactured since his return and has had a hand, pun intended, in 5 of the 8. So just doing his thing again on Saturday night there, the assist that he makes on the Sherwood goal. So you asked me about Hronek. Obviously, yes, slots in as the clear number 2 on this depth chart. But I am curious about deployment. Do we see Quinn and Philip Hronek split up? We've talked about that an awful lot. I think Tyler Myers has sort of held his own as the caddy for Quinn Hughes, and Quinn's performance certainly hasn't dipped. So I think you have to take a long, hard look at that. The other thing, guys, I think you have to really sort of reframe the view of the Vancouver Canucks and where they are right now. And I know going into Toronto, they had 2 wins in 11, and they were, they're percentage points behind Calgary for that second wild card. Like, all is not well with the Vancouver Canucks. But in saying that, they have held 4 of their last 5 opponents to 20 or fewer shots. They just came through this gauntlet of Washington, Carolina, and Toronto, 3 of the beasts in the East, 3 games in 4 nights. They gave up 4 goals. Total, 58 shots. Total for 3 games. Like, I think this is exactly how Rick Tocchet wants his team to play.
This was the plan for sure. Yeah.
The games aren't pretty. They're low event. But I think Tocchet believes in his heart of hearts that if we can get back to the staples and the guts of the ice and all that kind of stuff that served them so well last year, there's too much talent offensively, especially with the way that Quinn Hughes is playing, for the offense not to flow a little bit more. And if you're giving up 1 or 2 on any given night, you only have to score 2 or 3 to win some of those games that they've been finding ways to lose. So as much as people look at they're still not scoring a lot, and they're not, but man, they're not giving up much here against some really quality opponents. I do sort of feel like they want to turn the page. Toronto was the first game of the second half of their season. There is still runway here for these guys to get this thing sorted out. And remember, last year, part of the story was great first half, kind of limped to the playoffs and then went quietly into the night. How about flipping the script and, rising and building to the playoffs so that when you get there, you're at the top of your game individually, but collectively as a group as well?
Yeah, you can really argue it so many different ways and not be wrong. Like, you're right, the shot suppression, the goal suppression is there. But at 2 goals per game in their last 8 games, you can't possibly expect more wins. And yet you can think, man, you get 2 extra goals, just 2 in that 8-game span in the right spots.
Yep.
You get 2 more wins. So Rick Tocchet's plan executed exactly as he wanted in terms of the on-ice visuals. But without those extra goals, Jeff, and we'll see what the next 8 bring. Like, we'll see if they do build off Toronto. But this plan is still a failure if they don't score enough goals to complement the fabulous defensive play. Because the defensive play was executed perfectly. The offense, they are just short right now. So unless that shooting percentage turns around, they've got 3 wins in those 8 games. It could be another 3-win and 8-game stretch here.
And the schedule doesn't let up. Winnipeg and then home to Los Angeles, and they see Edmonton twice, and Washington's going to be here on the 25th. So they are in the gauntlet. They're in the soup right now, but I think they're going to try to see the positives of what they did against those 3 teams in 4 nights. But you're not wrong. You're right. There's so many ways to look at this right now. So getting Hronek back, you hope, a little less time in your own zone, move a few more pucks up front. Everybody else kind of falls back into their preferred slots. I mean, it'll be interesting to see ultimately how they deploy their defense here. But it is funny, too, again, for all the noise around, what's this guy and that guy and all of those guys, what are they doing in this lineup? And with that collection, individually, sure, they're flawed defensemen, but those are the guys they just went to battle with for 3 nights, and they got the job done defensively. So credit where it's due. Like a guy like Derek Forbort, very quietly, he's never going to be flashy. You're never going to leave the rink thinking, hey, he was the best player on the ice, and people aren't buying tickets to see Derek Forbort. But he killed 4 of the 6 minutes of shorthanded time the other night against the Leafs. It was 1-0 when all 3 of the Toronto power plays, like high leverage situations. He's out there for 4 of the 6 minutes of shorthanded time. the Leafs had 2 shots on goal on the power play all night. Like, I'm sure their post-game pods probably sounded like ours on a lot of nights. Like, what are they doing on the power play? How come they can't get shots? But with all that firepower on the other side, Canucks were up to the challenge at the very least, and Kevin Lankinen made a few stops when he had to, but he wasn't terribly busy. So a good team effort, but just getting Hronek back. And then I think we all still think that we're going to hear from management at some point. Like, you get Hronek back and you add one more piece. Like, yes, you could really change the look and the feel of this Vancouver Canuck defense here in a hurry.
Yeah, and I sure hope we hear from management at the midpoint here that there's a formal availability coming up when they're back here in Vancouver. You mentioned Lankinen, so let's go there before Brannstrom. We're asking on our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question, Jeff, should the Canucks re-sign him, even if it means paying him like a starter at this stage?
I think I'd use time, the time that they've got here. He's been terrific for them. There was a little dip there in December, like there was for the entire team. But even in the games in Washington, when they lost the other night, overtime, 1-goal game for the most part, he's holding them in there. And he's given them enough saves. Even Montreal, he made some incredible saves. I know 5 got past him, but he made some. It probably doesn't get to overtime if he's not making some of the saves that he did. And then for him to get his 4th shutout of the year already, just at the midway mark, like any way you slice it, he's been incredible and certainly a huge bang for the buck. So I think they have to be interested in having those discussions, but he's in for a raise. We know that. He gambled and lost last year, and the market just kind of closed around him. He doesn't want any part of that for a second straight year, But I don't think that you have to jump. I mean, they have his rights until July 1st, which means through the season and through the playoffs. I'm curious about the way they handle their goaltending between now and Four Nations, and I think they really can go and ride the hot hand here. Lankinen's performance has allowed Thatcher Demko time. Like Demko himself said it. That, like, I don't have to jump back in here and be the hero. You've got a guy that is doing this on a nightly basis. And let's be honest, Demko's performance hasn't been at the level that we've seen from him in the past. And I'm sure he knows that there's room for improvement. And so having Lankinen here buys Demko some time. I think where it gets interesting is after Four Nations. If they are able to finally string some wins together and get some positive momentum and they start to build towards the playoffs, the rotation is fine. Boston showed last year with Swayman and Ullmark. Washington is alternating goaltenders right now with Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren, and look at the success they're having. You can do it in the regular season. You can't do it in the playoffs. So there's going to come a point where a decision has to be made. The Canucks still view Thatcher Demko as this Vezina finalist from a year ago who might be able to get back to that level, but Kevin Lankinen is going to want those starts as well. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. You hope that it brings out the best in both of those guys, but I don't think there's any urgency. I don't think the Canucks need to get Kevin Lankinen locked up in the next week or two.
Do you think Demko's okay with 50-50 now? Do you think there's hurt feelings there, or do you think he's understanding that he's coming back from injury and that's just fine?
He said the right things. I think he has to recognize with 2 victories in his 8 starts. Now, he left the 1 game in Seattle, so 2 wins in the 7 games that he's managed to finish. Again, he hasn't jumped back in and been the Thatcher Demko of a year ago. So I think before his nose can get out of joint. And I get professional pride and all those types of things. Every guy wants to be the man. But I think he has to recognize that, Lankinen was brought in to do a job. He has done that and then some. And rocking the boat's not going to help anybody at this stage. So I think as a group, the Canucks know, like, they have to be better in the second half than they were in the first. It's just simple math. If they have 46 points in the second half like they did in the first, they're going to make it very dicey in terms of whether they'll be there when the playoffs begin. So they need more from Demko. They need more from Paterson, and they need more from Miller, need more from Brock Besser, all of their top players aside from Quinn Hughes. And so I don't think you can leave the goaltenders out of that equation. I like what I've seen and heard so far from Demko, but yes, as we get closer to that crunch time, I guess we'll get a better read on sort of how he's thinking and what he's feeling. He wants the net, but is he the best option for victories for the Vancouver Canucks? And it's a conversation that we've had, and I think it's one that we'll continue to have here as we monitor the thing going forward.
1 week from now, there's a 2-day break, but that is the last one before the Four Nations. They are a game on, day off pretty much from here on in, save for a week from now where they get just an additional day off once. So there's a lot of games, too, in terms of the goaltending. There's more than enough to go around here.
Yeah, and so I think the Canucks want to believe that if their goaltenders get that up to a level, like, look, Dustin Tokarski, great story. Canucks did nothing to test him the other night. The Canucks, with Thatcher Demko at the other end, should have had an advantage in goal. They didn't make it count. 24 hours later in Toronto, Leafs make the decision to go with Dennis Hildeby. Goaltending mattered. Hildeby, not that the goals were his fault necessarily, but Lankinen can't do any better than stopping everything that comes his way, and he got a little help on the crossbar on the Morgan Riley shot. But I think the Canucks want to believe now that they've got a tandem that should give them an edge almost every night. Tuesday in Winnipeg? Maybe not. When you see the things that Connor Hellebuyck is doing, and I assume he's coming off a shutout as well on Saturday. I assume they'll go back to Hellebuyck against the Canucks. That's going to be a task. I mean, this guy, in an era where we're talking about tandems and work share, is just ridiculous in his workload, the workhorse. Now, it hasn't worked out for them come playoff time, but he's got 26 of their 29 wins. Like, when they turn to Eric Comrie, they just don't win for whatever reason. But with Connor Hellebuyck, it's some of the surest money around. So, yeah, I mean, that's going to be a challenge for a low-scoring Canuck team to find ways to generate against Connor Hellebuyck. But I think on a lot of nights, they want to believe that the two guys they've got are as good or better than whoever the opponents throw at them at the other end of the ice. And we'll see ultimately if that does pay off for the Canucks over the long run.
In an era where the average save percentage is sunk down to 900, Hellebuyck is still at 928.
Yeah,
it's absurd.
You wonder what Cheveldayoff and them are waiting for in terms of trading for a backup goaltender here that can give him a few more nights off. Jeff, Eric Brannstrom has cleared waivers. Does that validate and vindicate Rick Tocchet, or is it still about the profile and the lack thereof on this Canucks blue line without him?
Yeah, I mean, just go back to what I said a little bit. I think these last few games where he couldn't get in and they make the choice to go with a Guillaume Brisebois over Eric Brannstrom, and they're able to play Rick Tocchet hockey. I think the fact they knew that Hronek was coming back here shortly, and I still expect that this management group is going to bolster the blue line. And for all those reasons, just not enough room for Brannstrom. He wasn't going to leap over the trickle down as bodies came back from injury and if players are picked up on trade. Does it solve the puck moving on the back end? Hronek's going to help a little bit, but there are still issues there. But I do think from around the time that Derek Forbort got back, I think it was December the 12th, they had another option, another big body back there. Canucks penalty kill has been among the best in the National Hockey League. Brannstrom doesn't do much of that. So when Quinn's in the lineup, he's not going to see much power play time. So now you judge him on his 5-on-5 minutes, and over the last month, and lots of people have put that out on social, the numbers have cratered for Eric Brannstrom. They have, defensively. And ultimately, you're a defenseman. Yes, you'd love some offense, but you have to be able to defend. And let's be honest, too, guys. I mean, basically in sheltered minutes, his numbers were starting to fall off considerably. So they managed to maintain the asset. He goes to Abbotsford. If they run into injury problems, they know that they've got a guy that's a tweener. Probably too good for the American Hockey League, but in the eyes of this coaching staff, just doesn't profile the way that they want their defense to play. And with Quinn Hughes here, I guess part of me understands it, and the proof will be in the pudding here. But coming off this past string of games, they're locking in defensively now, and they're doing it without Brannstrom, so I'm not shocked that it got to this point with him.
So in this new world order, who's the sixth defenseman? Let's pretend Hronek plays tomorrow night. Susie Myers are in for sure. And it sounds like you're believing that they are full-blooded Derek Forbort fans now. So let's assume Forbort is a certified fifth. Who is the sixth defenseman on a nightly basis for the Vancouver Canucks?
Right. So then it becomes a battle between Juleson and Desharnais, and sort of pick your poison, I guess. Every team's got flaws in a cap world, and you would look at that and think, all right, but if one of those guys is reduced to third pairing, like the issue has been that Noah Juleson's been in the top four by default, just because they don't have enough. If Noah Juleson is asked to play 13 minutes and some of that's penalty killing, you can probably get by. And I think I can live with that. And I think you're looking at basically swapping, right? Like, I don't know that one is preferred to the other, so maybe it's a 50-50, and Desharnais is getting in and taking some of those minutes as well. Juleson tries. It's not like he's not out there trying his best. It's just that there are very limited puck skills, and he's not alone. But where he can contribute is on the penalty kill. He's fearless. He blocks a lot of shots, and there is some utility there for National Hockey League teams. And so, yeah, we'll see where it goes. But again, I think I'm most curious about, has it come to that point now where they realize Quinn Hughes can be Superman with just about anybody, doesn't need Philip Hronek, and is the benefit of Hronek coming back after 21 games out, anchoring his own pair finally, especially at the price point that he is now being paid.
Although they might twist themselves in the knots thinking about, okay, but do we do that right off the bat? Do we let him have the training wheels of Quinn early on? Like it'll be interesting to see what they decide right off the bat when he's reinserted into the lineup. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm interested too. We always hear from Tocchet, right? Guys generally coming off long layoffs need a handful of practices. They've flown Hronek to Winnipeg. He's skating with the team. If he gets in, that's incredible. I know he had the week down in Abbotsford, and that's great, but is one practice good enough to jump in against the top team in the National Hockey League? Like that's challenges don't get a whole lot greater than that. We talked about Hellebuck, but just the depth of that Jets team. Scheifele with 25 goals and Kyle Connor with 23, and Gabe Velarde has 19, 10 of them on the power play. The Jets look like they mean business. Like you can't win in the playoffs in the regular season. Everybody knows that, but they look like they are building to get it right this time around after exiting a little earlier than they wanted last year.
Blake, it's about slotting. For example, we slot Jeff on Monday and Friday so we can recap the weekend, recap the week, point forward on both hits. Last week, Jeff was all over the place. The schedule and everything. Now we've got J-Pat appropriately slotted, much like they'll have Juleson or Dave.
Are you calling J-Pat our Juleson?
No.
That's a terrible.
No. I'm calling him our anchor. We need him on Mondays and Fridays.
Some might call Juleson the Canucks anchor, but that's a totally separate story. And
different metaphor, yes.
Yes. I certainly am not Vinny DeHarnay.
No, you're not.
There,
absolutely, and much fleeter. And we will talk to you on Friday. Good to have you back.
I've seen him skate. He's
in the bookend position.
I might trust J-Pat on the blue line.
He's a very good
more,
skater.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Talk later in the week.